Welcome back to the Endeavors AI podcast, the show where we cut through the noise of around artificial intelligence and talk about what it actually looks like in real businesses. I'm your host, Colin McKee, and today I'm joined with someone whose practice sits right in the middle of one of the most emotionally complex areas of law, and who happens to be a literal neighbor of mine here in St. Pete. Cynthia Hernandez. She runs a family law practice that has grown to the point where capacity is now the issue and not demand. So she made a deliberate point earlier in her career to pivot from immigration into family law, and she's been thoughtfully layering AI into her firm's operations to the tune of a 20% improvement in client retention. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Hi, happy to be here.
So take us back to that decision. What was the moment at which you knew you needed to make a pivot?
I think one of the main things was, back when I made the change, which was in the early 2000s, immigration was a very high volume. It had a lot of urgency to deal with. And fortunately, at the time, they had closed down the courthouse that was in Bradenton, which was closest to us, and only had courthouses in Orlando and Miami. So it made it almost like operationally difficult to do anything on a dime because we weren't close enough to be able to handle any type of emergencies or whatnot. And that really sat with me because I wanted to be able to have the client experience where they could have what they needed done right away. And since I wasn't positioned geographically in the right place, I felt like I needed to make a transition into something that I could offer that type of service.
So immigration court has some pretty unique operational constraints and timelines. Were there any others that kind of stuck out?
Yeah, so at least practicing immigration, most of the filings were manual. So everything had to be printed, everything had to be mailed. And so even though the federal system has online docketing, immigration was kind of left out, like the redheaded stepchild, not connected to the other docketing systems. So everything had to be manual. So if there was a hearing or a motion or deportation, something coming up, if there wasn't enough time to send it, then there wasn't enough time to represent the client to do that. And I just could not wrap my mind around that process. I wanted it to be able where if my client needed me today, I could file something and get it done immediately.
Cool. And so even though, the two practice areas of immigration and family look completely different on the surface, you spent years learning how to navigate a system, manage emotionally charged client relationships, operate under real procedural pressure. What did immigration teach you that you still use today in your family law practice?
I think that the main thing that I learned is number one, efficiency and discipline to make sure that everything is correct. Because if you make a mistake on a filing, it has such huge ramifications for the client, whether it's time, because now we've lost that time that they needed to file something, or the courts do not really have leeway. They would just grant a deportation and it becomes impossible to undo. So getting it right the first time was what I really learned doing immigration, and now I apply it to family.
Cool. So quite a pivot, and that takes some resilience to know when you need to make that kind of a change. Your outlook on the law practice is of a business and how to grow that business. So let's kind of look at how AI is assisting that. You mentioned that it's helped you retain clients. So that 20% stat really stuck out in my mind. You've increased your client retention roughly 20%. So in family law, where every retainer can mean tens of thousands of dollars in lifetime value, that could be an enormous number. So that retention went from what to what? Like where in the client journey was there leakage before where AI helped you retain that back in retained business?
So when we first started tracking our numbers, our retention rate was abysmally low. It was 7%. And the main factor was I was the person who was meeting with the clients, meeting and doing the calls, but then there was no capacity for follow up. There was no capacity to do a drip campaign, do any of the things to just kind of keep the clients, us, top of mind. And so, unless it was an emergency or something that someone wanted to retain you right away, it would be lost. And so now we're able to kind of see how long it's been since we've communicated with the client, how many touch points have we had with them. Because sometimes, as long as we are continuing to be in contact, I'll get someone that I talked to 3 months ago retain us because we're still reaching out, we're still top of mind. That was something that we just didn't have capacity to do. And now we're able to automate it with some AI assistance and also to keep track for the staff because we're able to pull last touch points. Before, you had to go in manually and check for every single person. And that just was not feasible to continue to do. But now we have tools that we can and we can go faster.
So what are, say, the 5 KPIs that you guys are tracking now thanks to AI?
So one of them is like once the client is retained, our communications. So I don't want more than a week to go by before a communication is made to the client. I don't want them to reach out to me first. I want to reach out to them and let them know what the status update is so that they feel that they're in the loop and they're cared for. That was our first one. Another one that we use is intake automation. Before, used to have them fill out questionnaires, fill out information. Everything is automated and it has different steps that flows into the next thing that we need. It helps with drag, with the staff having to reach out to them for each thing because now it's automated. We can then pull what those tasks are to see how long the client received the message versus how long it's taken them to get us the information. And then we can follow up faster to get it done. Another thing that we use it for is like workflow. We can now visually see, kind of like on a Gantt chart, where the case is in its life cycle of a divorce or paternity. We can see how long it's been there. So we can move it along because what clients want more than anything is finality. And when things take a long time, they get stressed out as they should because they're going through such a volatile time in their life.
Right.
So the more that we can see and move things for them, the happier they are because they know that they're getting to the end point. And like creating standards of procedure. That's been the greatest thing to have it automated, to have video, to be able to recreate it for every new staff member. So I know that they're getting the right information at the right time. And so it's not reinventing the wheel every single time someone leaves, comes back. I know that they're going to get the right training and that they can ask more pointed questions to me or anyone else who's here so that they can learn faster.
Right. No, I think that's really very strong point because a lot of people look at AI and their concern is it's taking the human touch out of it. But what you're saying, especially for these people going through a very stressful time in their life, obviously they want reassurance, they want that human connection during it, but more than anything, they want an answer. They want to make sure that they're heard, that they're being updated as often as they can. And there's honestly just so many hours in a day for you, Cynthia Hernandez, to be able to do that. And so that's what these tools are doing for you. They're not taking the jobs away. It's not replacing you. It's just giving you the availability to focus on what you need to and do all the other things at the same time. That's great because a lot of people just hear AI as far, especially in the law practice field, and they're like, oh, we don't want to implement it. We don't want to lose that human touch. But what you're saying is quite the obvious opposite. You're making sure that the humans are touched.
Exactly. Like I don't think that AI like it doesn't replace judgment.
Right.
It replaces lag.
Hmm.
And that's what every, I think, firm suffers from is because there isn't enough manpower to give that kind of client experience that you want to give without having a high price tag. This allows every firm to really be competitive because now you can offer the service and be just as efficient as one of the big law firms.
Yep. Awesome. So for everything AI is doing well in your firm, you've also got a front row seat to where attorneys get things dangerously wrong. So let's start with something a lot of attorneys aren't asking about yet: AI searches and discovery. Walk our listeners, if you wouldn't mind, through what they need to do and understand as far as AI prompts being discoverable.
So myself, as I am doing some research in, let's say, Claude or ChatGPT or whatever it is that I'm utilizing, Number one, even if I have a paid account, it doesn't eliminate the software from learning from the information that you're providing. So, number one, you have to scrub all of the data. Take the metadata off, take the client information off, as you're asking it specific information. So it's not utilizing it and then popping up somewhere else. So that's one thing as attorneys that we need to be clear what we're doing when we're trying to put in information, that it does not have the specific confidential info that your client is providing to you. Another thing that I don't think attorneys are providing counsel to clients because they don't even know yet is that a lot of the chat GPT or Claude responses are discoverable if the client is putting it in.
Hmm.
And so their research is not protected. Yours is as an attorney, but not theirs. So if they send a subpoena, they're going to the opposing party gets sent a subpoena, they're going to get all of the chat responses. And if they're asking something a little nefarious, you're going to be in a pickle.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns. People just kind of feel like they're free to do whatever with it, and it can come back to haunt you. So yeah, let's continue with the war stories. The Chat GPT generated brief disasters that have made some news. We all know about those. I'd like to know what's happening on the ground level with family court. Like, what have you seen from opposing counsel that made you go, "This person is clearly outsourced this to AI," and you just shelved it because there's no real value to it. What are some stories you can share from your experience in seeing people rely too heavily on the tools?
So for the tool to work, you really need to give it a very specific response. If you're general, it's going to hallucinate information to you and it's going to make it sound like it's the real deal when it is not. And so what I've seen is pleadings that have not had very specific response prompts to the question. And so the language in like motions or the case law that it pulls doesn't relate. Even if it's not real, like sometimes, most of the times the cases are real, but they don't relate because you did not properly ask, to dial in what it is that you're looking for. And then on top of that, there are closed systems where you can ensure that the case law at least is not fake.
Hmm.
But those systems still require for you to manually go in, read the cases, and see if there's anything else that truly applies because you can't just take the search and then pop it into a pleading or motion because that's only half the work. You still have to go in there and make sure that it's cross-checked and applies, especially to your specific facts for whatever your client has. And I've seen that a lot where I'll get a motion in and it's obvious, at least from the syntax and from like the structure, that it was created via AI. And then I have to go through and read through the cases that it's pulling, seeing that it doesn't match. And that wastes client money and time because now I have to draft a response to that. So much so now that a lot of the courts, at least here in Pinellas County, and I know that it's adopting all over, they're requiring you now to add kind of like a box at the bottom of every pleading that says if you've used artificial intelligence in the help of drafting it and that you are certifying that you've read every single case that's in here and that it is appropriately applied,
Right.
or else you're going to get sanctions personally as a lawyer. So these are things that if you don't take the time, then we end up with these requirements because the court is like, I don't have the time either to double check this work. And as I'm seeing it now, we're here on a hearing on my 2 hour block that I could have used it for another case because now we've gone nowhere.
Yep. The exact opposite of what AI is intended to do.
Right.
Now it's stealing your time. And you brought up a term that I had never heard of before, spoliation letters, in our first discussion. So can you talk a little bit more about that for our listeners like me that had heard that for the very first time, how that's becoming an issue and what that looks like with AI involved. I think it kind of ties to what we were just discussing, but if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
So it kind of cuts both ways. So we draft a spoliation letter, which is really meant for protection of whatever, online documentation or documents, anything that is pertaining to the case, that it doesn't be destroyed in any way. It also protects against, or it reminds the client that if you create something, that is discoverable. And so to think about what it is that you're creating, whether it's a social media post ranting about your mother, child's mother, or going into ChatGPT and asking some inappropriate type of questions, those things come to light. That's what the spoliation is for, to stop the destruction of documents that might be discoverable, but also to remind your clientele to not create anything that might be discoverable in a way that would be in a negative light to them.
Yep, yep. We all get a little guilty of from time to time trying to keep up with the Joneses and make another posts and, be a part of a conversation, but it's there forever. So, yeah, be cautious of what you create, little content creators out there.
Right.
So I want to shift to something else that you mentioned in our little pre-call, because I think it's a problem that a lot of firms are quietly dealing with. You told me beyond capacity, a specific bottleneck in your firm is, finding, in your case, Spanish speaking staff to fill a void. So walk us through what that role actually does and why bilingual capacity is non-negotiable in your practice.
So our firm has been blessed in the ability to be able to serve the Hispanic community. And so we get a lot of bilingual that speak Spanish, Portuguese, you name it. We get a lot. And so the requirement for the people who work with me to be able to be bilingual is just a non negotiable. We don't even have like just purely English speakers. I think that percentage is probably less than 20%. And so, because we service so much of this community, can't really have someone who only speaks one language, because then it would take away from one of my other staff members to translate and do, that work.
Mhm.
Two people for one person's job. So for me, I am personally in need of bilingual employees, bilingual attorneys, which is not that easy to come across. And so, what we've basically done is try as much as we can to tighten our systems and our processes so that way we can still run efficiently with the team that we have now. And if and when my unicorn shows up, we will be able to expand, because we are definitely at capacity, but still being able to offer the service that I think is still, viable and that the clients appreciate. But if I could bring in one or two more people, I could definitely expand. Like, expanding is the easy part. It's the service that is the hard part, because we want to make sure, because we get a lot of word of mouth. We want the client experience to be fantastic so that they tell their network and we keep growing.
Right. Yep. Yeah, the exact opposite. AI is not showing up at your door replacing that position for you. That's someone that a person actually needs to do. So finding that person, it's easier said than done. So, and I promise you that this will be the only worst case scenario question I ask you. But if that seat sits unfilled for the next 6 months, what do you think life looks like? Does it just get exponentially more difficult, or you have to turn people away because the capacity is just not there internally, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think we would have to turn work away, because I don't want the service to suffer. And, it creates a bottleneck, because right now there's me and my staff is only able to do so many things. They can't give legal advice. They can do certain admin tasks or drafting. But at the end of the day, having another lawyer would increase the ability to have more capacity to go to court, to talk to clients. And so it will stay the same until I can find another person that works. And if it continues in the same way, I mean, it could cause burnout, not just for me, but for my staff, because they are also, you know, if they can only set so many calls for me and a client, then they're also dealing with multiple calls from clients that want information. And there's not space in the week to like put them on with me. So that's why we've tried so hard to heavily invest into systems and client communication, So if we have a good system, it reduces the pressure on my staff, and they'll know that, we're still reaching out to them. The clients are feeling good, and we can stagger how we communicate with them so that they still feel heard.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's another wonderful point for our viewing audience to let sink in. Firms that are succeeding aren't replacing humans with AI, they're enabling their humans with AI to do more. And the human element of it is not going away, but AI is here, and it's a very real need to learn it and to use it correctly to build in efficiencies and to be able to provide, better service for your clients and your customers. That's very well said. So, as we start to kind of wrap things up, wanted to kind of zoom out and where you think, crystal ball, what happens to the firms that are, say, in 3 years' time, they're ignoring AI. They're going about life as they've always been. We don't need to break or fix anything. Nothing's broken. Where do you think those firms end up in a matter of 3 years?
I think those firms are going to struggle in the competition for the client experience because, like I said, we get a lot of work from referrals. And if they don't have responsiveness to their clientele, if they're slower to draft things or they're just operationally inefficient, those firms will slowly die out. And the new ones, the younger ones, can come in and be able to take over a portion of the clientele that is out there that wants to be serviced in this way, which is a majority of them. So that's what's going to happen if a firm doesn't adopt AI and utilize it to try to streamline their practice.
And so on the opposite side of that coin, what do you think happens to the firms that go all in and utilize AI in an unrestrictive, laissez-faire sort of way? What do you think happens to these guys?
I think for those firms, it turns it instead of like a personal experience into something that's more generic. And it makes it like very impersonal. I can't
Yeah,
see.
personal. Yeah.
If we are, automating every phone call, automating every email, and we're not having touch points with the attorneys, then the client's going to feel like, okay, but what did I pay for? Like, I don't understand why I can't get a hold of the attorney and everything is automated. I think it loses a little bit of trust in the process and the touch points are no longer there. And then you have other problems because you could expose yourself ethically billing for work that maybe didn't take the time that it took because you automated it. So it runs into the opposite side of problems. And really, at least for family law, and I would assume every area, but mostly family, because it's so emotional, people need to maintain that human touch. And bringing in these systems allows that human touch to be available more because now that I have more time to be able to provide that to a client.
So what's the first step? Where's the balance? If there's a managing partner, a solo attorney that's listening to this and they want to get started, they're not quite sure where to start. What should be the first move for, a managing partner of a small firm to make sure they're not left behind?
I think that taking a hard look at your numbers, number one, what are we bringing in operationally every year? What is each person bringing in? Like we have these billable hours for a reason. Is everyone hitting that? Why? And really sitting down with your staff to see where their bottlenecks are. What are they having a problem with keeping up with? And then as you kind of gather what those are, then you can see what type of AI products are out there that can alleviate that pain point. Because then as you implement each piece and you see that it's working, then you can just keep adding on more layers and then you'll see the improvement, not just from your staff, but overall at the bottom line, because now you'll see you have more capacity, you're bringing in more money, and the client experience is better than it was before.
Yep. Well said. Yeah, you got to know your numbers for sure, first and foremost. So Cynthia, this has been incredibly practical and very enlightening. I really do appreciate the conversations. For our listeners that want to find out more about your practice, whether if they need family law support, or if they're looking to become a member of your firm, hopefully, where should they look?
They can look on our website. It's cynthiahernandezlaw.com. And if any Spanish speaking lawyers are out there listening, give me a call.
Awesome. We'll definitely put that in the show notes. Thank you again for your time today. Thank you for being such a great neighbor. And for everyone listening, if you found value in this, please share it with an attorney or a firm who needs to hear it. And we will see you on the next episode.